Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, it's Alan Bonner again, and we are looking at Business Paper 9609/11, May-June 2017. So let's go straight to the questions, and let's see how we get on. Just talk this through. So the first question, define the term price skimming. Well, price skimming is a technique, and it involves basically setting a high price before other competitors come into the market. It's a pricing strategy. I guess it's mostly used with new product. And it allows you to layer off the cream of customer segments. So basically the price is lowered over a period of time. And it is very much, you can use the example of the iPhone. The newest iPhone, I believe, is around about £1,000. So it's going in at a very high price. But of course, that price will come down over a period of time, especially when Samsung come in with their new price or their new model of phone. It's a useful strategy when enough customers are willing to buy at that price. The high price does not always attract competition, and the lowering the price has little impact on the volume sales. High price often equates to high quality. So briefly explain why business might use price skimming strategy. To exploit the distinctive attributes of the new product, i.e. go back to the iPhone, as I say, to create a perception of high quality, and indeed you are probably going to make a bigger margin initially whilst it's at a high price to offset some of the product manufacturing costs. So moving on to 2A, window dressing. Define the term window dressing with reference to published accounts. Window dressing accounts is mostly found, I would argue, in investment brokers or mutual funds, organisations that generally rely on investors. It is very much a short-term strategy because it does stretch the truth sometimes. It's not fraud, but its intention often is to mislead. So the actual definition, it's important to remember here that you're looking for a definition, not looking for an explanation. So the definition is where a company accountant presents the published accounts in a very favourable way to shareholders and investors in order to give the appearance of a well-run company or to attract investment. That's the definition. So you're dressing up your accounts to make them look as good as possible. As I say, it's not fraud, but its intention is probably to mislead. The second part of this question, explain how window dressing might limit the usefulness of published accounts. Well, the answers may include giving a less favourable position, not really giving all the facts to the customer. The consequences are that you can only really do it once. You can't do it more than once. You could postpone paying suppliers. A lot of companies will, if the end of the year, for example, is say end of December, rather than pay in that month, you might carry over the cost of payment into the next month. Therefore, they wouldn't appear in this year's accounts. Again, it's not illegal, but it's misleading. It's suggesting that you've got more money in the business than you would otherwise have. Number 3, explain why corporate objectives, are important to a business. Corporate objectives. Corporate objectives are related to the whole business. They're usually set by management, and they do provide focus for setting more detailed objectives for the main functions for the rest of the business. So, for example, you could say that a corporate objective is to have or obtain 12% market share. Cascade that down to a functional objective that could relate to sales per customer of, say, £45. That could cascade further down to the individual units objectives, i.e. a shop, and you could say the sales equate to 500,000. So you can see how a corporate objective cascades down slowly to the bottom sales point. They tend to focus on the desired performance and results of the business. It is important, of course, that corporate objectives cover a range of key areas where the business wants to achieve results, rather than just focusing on one single objective. In fact, Peter Drucker would argue, and has done, that there are 8 corporate objectives that should be covered. Market share, market standing, innovation, productivity, physical and financial resources, profitability, management, employees, and public responsibility. They're the sort of 8 or so examples of where a corporate objective is useful. Also important in terms of corporate objectives that it encompasses every type of stakeholder, and it is a key point of leadership for any company that each stakeholder understands fully what the company objectives are. 4A, define the term emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence. What does it actually mean? Again, not looking at anything other than a statement, a definition, a one-line statement, not expecting it to be expanded upon. So emotional intelligence is the ability of managers to understand their own feelings or emotions and those of the people they work with. An awful lot of work has been done on emotional intelligence, and not least, Goldman has created quite a lot of work on emotional intelligence. So the things that he's covered off are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social skills. All those are extremely important in terms of leadership, and understanding how you impact and your behaviour impacts on other people is a very big part of emotional intelligence. So, two of Coleman's emotional intelligence competencies, just to recap: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social skills. So section B, the essays, you need to answer one of these questions, but we'll just cover them all completely. So analyse why a business needs to be accountable to its stakeholders. As I say, each business has several stakeholders. Customers would be one, suppliers another, obviously employees, but also geographical stakeholders, i.e. where the business operates and its impact on its local environment. Government in lots of cases is a stakeholder because it has an interest in your business because you'll be paying tax. Lastly, and not in any particular order, shareholders also are a key stakeholder in business. So stakeholders are a group of people that have an interest in your business. They will all have a slightly different interest, and you need to be accountable to all of them. The bank manager is going to want to see certain evidence your business is run properly. Your customers will want evidence and service levels from you. Employees will be wanting a good salary and they'll be wanting good benefits. They'll expect job security. Every stakeholder needs something slightly different. So 5B, discuss how there could be conflict between the stakeholders of a fast food retailer. Well, really covered that off really, because the fast food retailer has several stakeholders, not least employees. It would have customers, and it would probably have shareholders. Introducing new products, changing price, changing pay, they would all be of interest to the shareholders. Anything that increases costs to the business would be of interest to the shareholders. Making profit would be important to the shareholders. What would be important to the employee would be working hours and conditions. There can quite clearly be a rub between those two stakeholders. Shareholder wanting costs reduced, employees wanting a pay rise. Very simplistically, one is wanting to increase the cost of the business, the other one is looking for it to be reduced. It's also important to recognise that some stakeholders are more important than others. Certainly shareholders are very, very important, as indeed the board are very important. It's very important not to forget that employees, the one group of people that you put your business in their hands, so to speak, are probably, in my view, the most important. Question 6. So, discuss how Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I've already gone through, the 5 needs, could be used by managers of a retail business to motivate their employees. Well, obviously, the biological needs, the first level of need, the food, the drink, the good pay, the fringes, the fringe benefits of being an employee are very, very important. But stability and security of employment is also really, really important. And therefore, when you move up, working in teams, having the business at your heart, understanding what you're trying to achieve as a business, all these things roll into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The better you do your job, the better we as a business will succeed and be more successful, which encourages security, which encourages good fringe benefits, etc., etc. It's an iterative process. So making sure that people are well looked after, understand where the business is going to, that they understand that the better job they do, the more likely their job is to be secure, and the fact that they might get more job satisfaction by understanding the objectives of the business is the important thing. Moving on to question 7. Analyse why the effective control of inventory is important to a manufacturing business. Inventory management. Well, very important to understand inventory. There's a considerable amount of work on inventory and the supply chain in particular. So the types of inventory are raw materials that you buy in to make a widget or whatever. You have stock inventory of work in progress, and that's on the manufacturing and assembly line. And lastly, you have outputs. You have your finished product. So it's important to have really good and strict controls over your inventory in each of those processes. So buying too much raw material in creates a lot of cost, although you may justify that by negotiating a good price, but nevertheless it is there as stock and has to be paid for. Making sure that your work in progress, your semi-finished production line, and in all its various stages, is moving at the right pace through the assembly line, and making sure that the finished goods are distributed through your network as effectively and as quickly as possible. On top of that, you'll have consumables, you'll have products that you have to buy in order to make the product. You'll have also waste from the assembly line, and you'll have finished goods that are in transit. So there'll be lots of stock in various states. either being made in its raw state, or it will be finished. And the finished product will be distributed in many areas and stored. Each one of those areas needs to have very strict control. And if you don't have strict control, you can either run short of product, not have the right raw materials, or you could quite easily be overstocked, which is costing you money. So discuss the advantages and disadvantages for manufacturers of using the just-in-time method of inventory. Just-in-time. I'm going to tell you a story about just-in-time. Just first of all, just-in-time is a strategy to manage your inventory, to increase your efficiency and to decrease waste by making sure that you receive goods only as they are needed in the production process, which obviously reduces costs. It does demand that this method of stock management, it demands that the forecast is absolutely accurate. You must be able to forecast very accurately. And it's a big shift away from the traditional just-in-case strategy. So I'll order 10, although I only need 8, just in case type of attitude. And a lot of businesses still operate on that basis. I mean, a good example of just-in-time would be a car manufacturer that operates on very low inventory levels, relying on the supply chain, the suppliers, to deliver the parts it needs to build its cars. The parts needed to manufacture the cars don't arrive before or indeed after they're needed. Instead, they arrive just as they're needed. There are several advantages over the traditional method. I mean, the production run remains short, and it means manufacturers can move from one type of product to another very easily. And it reduces costs, as I've already highlighted. It eliminates the need to have huge warehouses to store product in. Of course, you can quite easily see the disadvantages of just-in-time inventories. If a supplier of raw materials has a breakdown and can't deliver the goods on time, then one supplier can shut down the entire production process. In fact, this happened to Toyota back in the 70s, and it took a very long time Toyota started just in time back in the 70s. It took them a long time to define and perfect it. They had a major issue back in the mid-90s, and where there was a fire at the plant that produced their brake parts, and it reduced its capacity to produce a valve for the Toyota vehicles. And this one supplier of the valve was the only supplier. They only had one supplier of that part. And they had to shut down 2 weeks, which actually devastated Toyota's supply chain. And it ran out of its stock in 1 day. And it took another couple of days before they were able to reinstate the necessary valves. And the suppliers of Toyota also had to shut down because manufacturer didn't need any other parts to complete any cars. So just in time demands everybody to be operating in sync. In actual fact, the cost of Toyota was in the billions of dollars in revenue, and they lost something like, I don't know, 50, 60,000 cars, produced cars in the just 2-day shutdown. So there are advantages and disadvantages. And the advantages mostly on the efficiency, in terms of less waste, in terms of less cost, but there are disadvantages, and it does demand that you have a very smooth operating supply chain.